Chatham today is visiting the Caleb Nickerson house in North Chatham. And today they are having their annual Harvest Festival. And we will be speaking with three people today who are artisans in colonial life. Maureen Leavenworth, who will be the person inside the house doing cooking. Ann Firth, who is a colonial gardener. And Richard Noyes, who is a carpenter, in those days called a joiner. And we'll be visiting with these people today as we tour around the Caleb Nickerson house. We're going to start our visit with Ann Firth, a period gardener who will tell us a little bit about the types of vegetables and plantings that the colonists used, or the Nickersons used, at that time.
This planting arrangement here is based on the Native Americans' three sisters. This is not exactly how they would have done it. They would have had big fields and they would have planted in mounds where they would have had the corn, the squash, and the beans. We've done it here on a small scale just as demonstration. The corn grows tall, and when the corn is about a foot tall, you plant the pole beans on it. As you can see, the pole beans are currently so heavy they're actually weighing down the corn at this stage. Beans get the advantage of climbing the corn. Beans provide nitrogen naturally to the plants, so they're providing food for the corn plants. The squashes that are around, and at the moment we have cucumbers, which would have been cowcumbers at the time. The cowcumbers and other squashes filling in around the base of the corn plants help to discourage raccoons and other varmints from crawling in and under through them, as well as just naturally benefiting from some of the advantages of being near the corn and the beans as well. So it was mutually beneficial to all three crops and to the Native Americans to grow their plants this way. What we have here are some beets. Again, the greens can get eaten. They're a great source of iron and nutrition. You can see we've got a very large, we can just give this one a pull, very large red beet here. This is something that can be boiled or baked and then sliced, but it'll also store very well for the winter. So again, you could just store this in your root cellar, or you would pack it in a half barrel, say, or a box with some sand or sawdust, and that would keep for most of the winter. So the root could be eaten all winter, the greens would be eaten fresh for fresh greens. We've also got some carrots in here, and these are large carrots. They were spring planted. And we've got a lot of soil attached right at the moment, but you can see that underneath it's very wet in here. You can see underneath we have an enormous carrot. Actually, I believe what happened here is we've got several carrots that grew together to form one. But the variety of carrots we have, even when they're large, they're still tender and juicy in the middle. People often think that unless they've got little carrots, they're not very good. That's not necessarily the case. The ones we tend to grow are specific for fall crops, and they're quite delicious inside. Again, high in vitamin A. Great storage crop for the winter. You can eat them fresh all summer long, and you can put them in your soups and stews all winter. And we have one more winter crop in this, well, winter again, spring planted. And these are parsnips. Parsnips are actually something, this is a short, stocky one. Oftentimes they're longer. The next one I pulled might be much longer. But there's something that you can eat again right now. They're best actually after a cold spell, after a frost, they turn sweeter. And there's a colonial cookbook that, in the colonial era, the cookbooks actually gave you advice as well as they were like a housewife's guide. So there's one cookbook that actually says that the best parsnips are those to be harvested in March. So you could conceivably come out all winter long if the ground wasn't totally frozen, pull parsnips, and again in March harvest the last of your parsnips before they start to go to seed. All of these crops are what we call biennials. That is, the first year they grow the root and the leaves. The second year they would send up a stalk of flowers, and you would want to save one or two of those to go to seed so that you would have seed to plant for next year.
We continue our journey today at the Caleb Nickerson house, visiting Richard Noyes, artisan in residence. He is what in colonial times was known as a joiner.
Here at the Caleb Nickerson house, we wanted to do a demonstration of how this house was built 200 years ago. So we also decided that it needed something that every house this age would have had, which is an outhouse. So we built what we call the world's strongest outhouse, which is right here behind me. It's done as a timber frame, except for the shingles holding, or except for the nails holding the planking on the outside and the shingles on. There are no nails, bolts, screws. There are no metal fasteners in this building. It's all joined together with wood. And you can see the size of the timbers, and here are the pegs, which are driven in. Now this piece has a tenon on the end that goes all the way through this. So this is joined to this. When the peg is driven in, it pulls the whole joint tight. The peg is cut flush on the outside, obviously, because of the sheathing. When I said they knew how to join wood without using nails, you have a bent right here. You can see the outline of the frame, the end wall of the outhouse. When they wanted to join two of them together, they used a dovetail. This is called a half-lap dovetail. This goes halfway through this timber. This beam in the floor is joined to the back sill, but when this dovetail was driven in, it pulled the back to the front. So the sills are joined and they can't come apart. The timbers are all white pine. Everybody says, well, what, doesn't pine rot? Well, no, it doesn't. And originally they shingled the roof. Well, they tried thatch, but thatch didn't work too well in our climate. The first shingles they made were generally of white oak. White oak is commonly used in boat building. They would split the shingles off, and then some of them were like 4 feet long and 1.5 feet, 2 feet wide, because they had more trees than they knew what to do with. But over time, they found that white pine shingles, which are a whole lot easier to make, actually lasted longer than white oak.
We're continuing our visit at the Caleb Nickerson house. We're now inside, and we're going to visit with Maureen Leavenworth and Christine Riley, who will be cooking on the hearth and showing us some of the things that they do to prepare a colonial meal.
This is harvest day at the Caleb Nickerson house, so we've pulled a various amount of vegetables, root vegetables from the garden, and we're going to be preparing a vegetable soup as well as squash rolls. We have a chicken on the string roasting over the fireplace, and what we're doing now is getting ready for a garden salad. So again, we're pulling things from the garden in terms of salad and also herbs. This morning what we had to do was take one of our little butternuts and we boiled it down. This was part of the squash that's going to be in the squash rolls, as well as it will be incorporated into the vegetable soup, since it is a root vegetable. One of the wonderful beverages that I have not put together yet, this is a concentrate of raspberries with vinegar and sugar, and it's called a raspberry shrub. Now this is a concentrate of it. What you would do at raspberry time, harvest all your raspberries, doesn't matter how many actual amounts that you have, pints or quarts. You measure in a pot the same amount with vinegar, boil it down, and then when it's strained, you end up with a raspberry concentrate. Add an amount of sugar, again, boil it down, and then what you would do is just take 1 tablespoon of this concentrate to ice water, and you'd have a nice little beverage. This was something that people drank during the summer, and it's very, very thirst quenching. Most often it was the housewife that was spinning the chicken. It was also a method that the children would do as well. They would help out. This particular chicken is stuffed with herbs from the garden and apples. I've also done it with bread, butter, and herbs. This is the first time I've tried directly with all herbs, and we've also taken herbs and stuffed it under the skin as well.